This is Geeks Represent, where we talk about representation and issues that matter to us geeks. We are
Joe,
Marshall,
Sean,
and your hosts, Daryl. Gunfights, lawlessness, and inexplicable thirsts for justice. When it comes to movies, it doesn't get much more American than the Western genre. It's no surprise Western movies and TV shows have persisted even to this day in various forms. So grab your hats and let's get into the evolution of the Western. So geeks, how would you describe a Western?
well, I like to think that the biggest commonality amongst all Westerns is typically about a tale of survival in a new frontier, usually by people just trying to make a claim in a new world where, they don't have to necessarily follow the rules or laws of where they came from. They can be free. And usually with typically, not always, but typically some sort of anti-hero who is either just trying to protect what's theirs or trying to mind their own business, and then just kind of get sucked into matters of justice.
yeah, and lots of guns and gun fighting, and blatant disregard for the natives.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Whether it be human natives or alien natives or wherever the genre is at, it's just we're pioneering because we're American.
Hey, lately Westerns have been a lot more, I don't know, culturally sensitive and or diverse. With actual Native American actors.
Yeah. Actual Native American actors. That's a fair point.
Yeah. I mean, I can't lie. Old school Westerns definitely have colonialism or colonist or Manifest Destiny vibe to them. That's for damn sure.
Definitely Manifest Destiny.
Yeah. That's the reason why Americans were out there, you can say.
Mm-hmm.
Going out
disregarding
west.
the natives. Damn, man.
It includes the aliens too, because we're going to talk about it later with sci-fi Western.
Yeah.
And it's a genre that kind of has been slotted into and mashed up with other settings and you can say speculative fiction type genres.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Because it's just fun. There's a reason why Tarantino made so many of them.
Yeah.
Aside from the guns, which definitely help.
So, we could touch on this a little bit. But, what makes a Western a Western? And what makes it so, such a long-lasting genre?
Like Sean said, it's very American. And not just tongue-in-cheek way, but also again, it's a nice metaphor, if not a straight up depiction of how Americans try to make a new life here, not just the white ones either, because there's plenty of examples of people of color Westerns of Black people or of Asian people or with Latinx, a lot of people who are coming to a new world, just trying to make it. And I think that's what makes Westerns very appealing to everyone.
Yeah, it's basically the American dream, because most people went out west in search of the gold rush or claiming land, and that was their way to just finally have some kind of wealth or something that they could call their own and whatnot. And I think people also like it because it's a return to simpler times and problems without advanced technology, even though they might use it in a sci-fi one. The whole returning to simpler times things is a recurring theme that seems that people I think seem to like and enjoy, because it just makes things less hectic, even though it's very hectic.
None of the problems of being in the city, in an urban setting, right? Even when you're in space, they're away from civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also so versatile.
Yeah.
So you can kind of just keep the core of some of the tropes and just kind of add those ideas, the thoughts of freedom, thoughts of just being able to go out and explore, find new things, make a way for yourself. And that can kind of go into a lot of different places and put into a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Any bounty hunters can go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, like, yeah, it brings in, like, the idea of bounties, and you can get ultra rich by not only settling, but by, like, gunslinging and, like, taking matters into your own hands. And the whole idea of vigilantism, like, really is strong throughout Westerns, to the point where I feel like it probably influenced a lot of, like, superhero genres as well, characters and everything.
Not just being like a hero, but also like, you know, robbing banks and trains, right? Like a lot of heists are rooted from like old like Western stories. So it's fun.
Yeah.
Like it's fun for both good guys and bad guys.
Yeah. I feel like it like kind of continues like even old stories, like the ideas of like Robin Hood and stuff like that, like bringing that to like a modern take. Yeah.
But incorporating technology like the steam engine, right? So like like Robin Hood on his horse chasing down a train.
Yeah.
With guns.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And also like, you know, a lot of like Westerns are like revenge stories too, right? And revenge, that's a tale as old as time. Like as far as like the Count of Monte Cristo and all that, or like Greek mythology. So it's a different setting, but it's such a like Daryl was saying, such a versatile one. You can do it whatever with like Western ideas.
Yeah, and the way that it's like shot, it like really combines like nice scenery and cinematics with just straight up like you can shoot it anywhere basically. It's not too complicated to the point where like I feel like it's influenced and even combined with a variety of genres later on. Like you have your spaghetti westerns, you have your ramen westerns, and you have your sci-fi westerns, all kind of like just taking the idea.
It kind of cycles on itself too, because you know, like one of the early westerns, like the original like Magnificent Seven, was based on like Seven Samurai, like the Kurosawa movie, right? And then Kurosawa films later on were actually influenced by old westerns too, and it just kind of like builds on each other. Just, you know, like, genre mixing kind of becomes inevitable at that point. Like you can see a lot of like influences on like old Western films from like Journey to the West, right?
Yeah.
Right. Other like Asian stories.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most of Tarantino movies are definitely influenced by most of the spaghetti westerns by like Clint Eastwood, like all the Dollar trilogies and all that stuff.
With a splash of martial arts there and there.
Yeah.
And katanas.
And some people say one of the first great westerns was The Great Train Robbery back in 1903. No, it may not have been the very first, but it was one of the most successful commercially, you could say, in those times.
Yeah, for sure.
I can see that, especially since it's so fresh. Like, that's literally right after the 1800s.
Yeah. Apparently it was filmed in New Jersey. So,
you know what? That doesn't surprise me because there's actually a recent Western. I think it's considered a Western that takes place in 2008 Philadelphia, and it kind of goes into like the horse rearing culture of Philadelphia. So if they filmed that in New Jersey, that's probably where they got their horses.
Interesting.
Which people didn't think about. Yeah. In the end, though, I think what really draws people to Westerns is like, I think anyone can relate to the idea of like, you know, watching out for yourself and your own, like trying to survive, trying to make sure like you and your family are taken care of.
Yeah. That and like the whole like kind of seeing how society operates without law. Because I feel like it gets brought back a lot, especially in modern times, because of like, say, a post-apocalyptic film or a post-apocalyptic anything. Like, after everything is nuked, all you have is basically sand and dust and no laws and stuff like that. So it's a great...
And gasoline!
So it's so it's a great retelling of like of that like of a kind of like Lord of the Flies kind of type thing.
Yeah. With cars and guns.
Yeah. Or rafts if you're talking Waterworld or
like Waterworld?
I feel like that could be a
Waterworld. Can Waterworld be? I guess. I just realized Australia loves those post-apocalypse. Is it because of all that sand, all that desert?
Yeah, it's probably easy for them to shoot there. Yeah, it's very
swaths of uninhabited land out there. Yeah.
Never considered Waterworld as a Western, but now I kind of like, you know what, that makes sense. There you go. I mean, if Mad Max can be.
Yeah.
So what are some great examples of some recent Westerns? Like within the past 10, 20 years or so?
Sure. Well, a recent one I saw was like The Harder They Fall, which I forgot to look this up. I think was actually either directed or produced by Jay-Z and somebody else. Okay, so yeah. It's officially directed by The Bullets, which is made up of...
Sounds very Western.
Never mind.
Largely metal and gunpowder.
The Bullets, which is the stage name of James Samuel, who's worked a lot with Jay-Z. And yeah, so definitely groundbreaking because I feel like there wasn't a lot. I can't, aside from like Django Unchained, and even then, like that Django Unchained was kind of a good mix of both like black and white actors. The Harder They Fall was mostly, if not almost all, black cast, and from like their perspective, but it didn't necessarily like, you know, put that on top. Like it was just a really good Western, you know, like, and kind of highlighted that, hey, you know what, every other Western shows like white people, most Westerns show white people, guess what, black people lived out west too. Like it did very well, and it was a badass movie. Idris Elba was a great villain. Actually, not just Idris Elba, Lakeith shit, what was his name?
Stanfield, something like that. Stanfield.
Yeah, Lakeith Stanfield. He was a surprisingly very, very cold and like calm, but also kind of a sinister villain too. And same for Regina King as well. All three of them made really great villains in that film, so I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'll say I haven't watched a lot of Westerns myself. I've mostly seen things that have referenced other Westerns, like classic stuff, I'm assuming. Like before this, try to do a little research, asked a buddy at work about some recommendations. We'll have to watch all of them before we recorded, but like before all this, and y'all know by now how not so deep my movie watching knowledge is. So like, I mean, I've seen things like Firefly and Cowboy Bebop, some of the things that, you know, are influenced by the style. One thing that was part of like Doctor Who, there for season 7 in the new series, they had a series of episodes that were like influenced by and made references to different movie genres. And so they had a Western episode called A Town Called Mercy. And there was I believe it was like an alien marshal in the town that kind of was introducing more technology than expected in the little town in, I think, Mexico. And so overall, good show, good series, good episode. Better than the pirate one. I'd still recommend it.
Nice.
Yeah, I feel like, so Joe already mentioned Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, Magnificent Seven, even the Book of Eli. They all had like really strong black characters too, which is nice to see, like the representation that, yeah, there are people who were there other than white people during that time. But
or can have like interesting revenge stories.
Yeah.
Or especially have interesting revenge stories.
Yeah. Book of Eli was, I would say, is definitely more modern times because it's like post-apocalyptic, so that brings the whole idea of like, okay, society is back into like Western like lives. Westworld is another one where they do have really strong, diverse casts and leads as well. It starts in a Western setting, and then as you know, it's still in the future. So yeah, it's like a combo, I guess.
I mean, you could argue like the whole thing about
heavily driven by Western. But go ahead, Joe.
I was just saying, I mean, like you said, the first season of Westworld like kind of goes into how people exploit people's interest in the Western, like that sense of lawlessness and that sense of like you could do whatever you want. And for some people it's to be a hero. For others, it's to, you know, rape and kill as many people as you want. And, you know, I guess that kind of like leans into like the dark side of the Western, right?
Yeah.
That people might appeal to and exploit it.
Yeah. So, yeah, those are the, I would say, recent ones. And then ones that like start blurring the line of Westerns would be like Kill Bill, because that still would be like kind of like a spaghetti Western story, but it's definitely not a very Western setting. And then, as Daryl said, like Cowboy Bebop, we get into like your space operas and space Westerns, where you see things like Star Trek, even The Mandalorian, and even Star Wars. A lot of Star Wars stuff ends up being very Western-like. And yeah, Trigun for sure. Outlaw Star, to name a few.
Samurai Jack.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So those are some pretty good recent Westerns.
Yeah. It's also interesting because we mentioned like people especially know there were white people in the Old West, and people tend to think that's all there were. And then, you know, recently there have been films like, you know, reminding there were black people, but also there were Asian people out there too, running the railroads. And I feel like, or like just in general, like just being brought over to whose cheap labor was exploited, right? I mean, kind of tangent, but there's literally stories of like they would send like Chinese people into like caves with like dynamite to like blast, to basically suicide bomb themselves in order to like expand mining caves, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Not
so
surprised.
they existed. Not surprised. But, no, not surprised at all. But in any case, but like a more lighthearted version of that is like, you know, Shanghai Noon, which still kind of goes like taps into that, like Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson. Again, Owen Wilson exemplifying, you know, the fun side of the Western. Like, you gave me wrong directions. No, you gave me bad directions. No, I gave you wrong directions. But yeah, Shanghai Noon. But also, like, I would consider Warrior, even though Warrior takes place in I mentioned Warrior before, and that's because it fucking rocks. It takes place in San Francisco. You could still argue that, you know, it's about like a guy from China, or a guy being brought over to a new environment and having to adapt to survive. And they even had a whole episode where, you know, two of the Tong, him and his best friend, who's also in the Tong, they're smuggling basically. And they go past this like tiny, like old West town, and where they find another Chinese guy who they can speak privately in Cantonese with. And it's like, you know, he's married to a white woman. He owns that inn, like he owns that like saloon. And he's like, this is the American dream. And it's like, that is exactly what a Western sounds like, a guy. And the whole episode deals with them defending that saloon from bandits. And I was like, this is the Western story.
Yeah.
This is the American dream. So yeah, stories like that.
I feel like I've seen clips of that scene, and I was like, because I was like really imagining a Western like look when you mentioned Warrior, because I was like, oh yeah, that was there.
Yeah.
Another one that they had Asians involved was Once Upon a Time in China in America. That's when Jet Li comes over, and it's during what Joe mentioned with like the Chinese building the railroad at the time, and just like, I guess, his experience in America and like fighting in the Wild Wild West. So that was definitely an Asian Wild Wild West story as well.
Much better than The Warrior's Way. I'm sorry. I know, like, we were talking about great examples. I gotta talk about the movie, which was basically cowboys versus ninjas. It was terrible. It was so funny. It was so fun to watch.
A lot of bad westerns. I just mentioned one too when I said the Wild Wild West with Wild Wild West.
Oh yeah.
Wait, you were going to talk about Wild Wild West? Why?
I mean, classic steampunk giant mechanical spider.
They had really good steampunk.
Guy with spider legs. Guy with mechanical spider legs for legs. Right? Didn't he? Or,
yeah.
Will Smith, no. Didn't he turn down the Matrix for Wild Wild West?
He did.
Yeah.
Big mistake.
That's wild. He could have been the one.
That's wild.
Wiki wild, you might say.
Oh, God.
Oh, man.
But yeah, not all Westerns are good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like they did it too soon with the genre bending. Too soon. Something like that, steampunk, would work better nowadays with better special effects.
Yeah. Doesn't help us bad story that much. But
no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Hey, I don't know. It was a remake of an older TV show, but I don't know how crazy that show went.
I bet they didn't have giant robot spiders. But yeah, we talked about how it doesn't have to necessarily be like in the past either, because you got some other ones like Sean mentioned, like Westworld, which is clearly in the future, but also like even like thinking Logan, right? You know, in an X-Men world, still has all the elements of like a powerful, like solid Western, you know, just people, in this case, mutants trying to survive. And then, you know, someone drops in his lap, like a little girl who is, spoiler, related to him. And he has to like make sure he gets her to safety, and it's out in like the desert. Like, I think it was like New Mexico, right? Or Arizona, something like that. Nevada, maybe. I don't know. But,
yeah, something like that. They were definitely hiding in the desert.
Yeah, and kind of like that. That happens a lot. Like that was exact plot of Into the Badlands. Now that I think of it too, like guy just like a ruthless killer trying to mind his own business and survive, and then a kid gets dropped in his lap, and all of a sudden he's like, it's my responsibility to get you to safety.
Yeah, that's a trope.
Yeah, that is definitely a trope. Because that reminds me of Shane the Western. That thing came out like in the 1950s or whatever. But yeah, he's like a super badass guy. Then some kid and his mom moves into town, and like everyone, he's trying to make that kid not get wrecked. So it's just him like just shooting up everyone to protect the family. Yeah, very very classic trope.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because it works. It's just it's simple. It's simple.
Yeah.
You know,
it appeals to a lot of human nature.
Yeah, exactly. You can be really sympathetic for the kid, as long as they're not too annoying, and for just the drive to keep someone safe, you know?
Yeah. Or like if someone got killed or something. Because like there's a lot of overlap between like Westerns and maybe like, you know, crime noir detective stories. The one I'm thinking about in particular is Jeremy Renner, Emily Olsen's Wind River, which if you haven't seen it, takes place in like it's modern times, and it takes place in like a Native American reservation. And it's because like they're trying to figure out who killed this basically raped and killed a Native American girl. And so it's a simple plot. Like it's a detective story, right? But it's also very like revenge noir, because Jeremy Renner plays like, I think he's an agent for like the fish and wildlife, and
the WWF.
I think so. And he works with the Native American reservation a lot. And like by the end of it, he finds the killer, and he forces him, like he did the girl, to like strip naked and walk through the snow with bleeding out, and just to be like, I wonder if you'll last longer than her. And he doesn't. So like, obviously he freezes in the snow. It's like, oh yeah. I was like, it's cruel, but he deserved it for what he had done. So definitely that like revenge element. Same thing for like El Camino, which is like a Breaking Bad spinoff or a continuation of Jesse's story from the ending of Breaking Bad. And like at first it's about his like escape. He's trying to like get the hell out of there, you know, before like drug lords try to get him again. And it ends up, and then midway it starts being like he's gonna kill the people who are still alive who are responsible for him being imprisoned and forced to make meth in the first place. And it even ends in a showdown, which was pretty badass. Like they even comment, it was like, all right, we'll settle it this way. We'll have a good old fashioned like shootout. Like winner person who lives takes the money. It's like nice way of what's his name? Vince Gilligan to call it back. Like, oh yeah, this is definitely a modern Western story. No kid to protect this time, nothing like that. Simply like revenge. So, revenge and survival.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of directors really want to like enjoy cutting their teeth on Westerns. They really want to at least try directing or creating a Western at some point.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, I feel because I feel like another good element of a good Western is the tone, right?
Yeah,
like, and it doesn't always have to be a consistently like dreary tone. Like Magnificent Seven, which is still like a more serious like action movie, like action Western movie, still had some fun moments, right? Like I forgot his name. He's considered like the Brad Pitt of South Korea, but he's one of the seven. And like he's trying to teach like the farmers who are trying to defend themselves from bandits, like he's like guns are easy. Like guns are too hard. Like guns are too complicated. Knives are easy. And he shows off like his like knife wielding skills. But obviously he's like a master martial artist. So it looks complicated. See, it's easy. And he turns back to the farmers and the farmers just pick up guns, drop the knives, pick up guns. Like, nah, this is easy. This is like, no, that's not. So it doesn't have to always, it could have a comedic tone, or like Ballad of Buster Scruggs definitely has like, you know, dark humor, if not just straight up absurd humor built into it. Like the guy who like survives 2 hangings only to finally get like killed on the third one. But by the third one, he's already accepted it because he already had to accept his death twice. So he's like, whatever, just get it over with. So played by James Franco. But for a good Western, it has to match, like, you know, like Sean mentioned, like the scenery, like the typically like great like landscape scenery, and or the tone, or like, you know, for like, especially for like the revenge thriller. Like I feel like Westerns just have like such a good template for like the feeling or emotion that the director wants to convey, depending on like the story. You know,
they really do.
So any final thoughts about Westerns?
Just that they're badass and there's so many ways to cut them, you know. It's like one of those genres, like, it's funny because I kind of see it similar to how people try to treat country music, if you, in a way. And I say that because one is kind of influenced by like the Explained series on Netflix, because they actually go into country music. But how like when people think of country, similar to how they think of Westerns, they think of like, you know, like Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, you know, that sort of that, right? And with country music, they think of like, you know, old school country, where it's primarily white dominated. Not realizing that both country and Westerns have evolved so much, and like so many other properties have so many roots in them, that, and you can see the influences of both in a lot of things, and yet people try to deny it, or people try to deny the evolution that typically means like more diversity, more diverse stories, more diverse characters or settings and all that. But basically, don't be a fucking gatekeeper and just try to keep an open mind.
All right. Fair enough. So, dear listener, do you have a favorite Western? Leave a comment on our social media and we will shout it out during the podcast. Like the user Woozy Kalai out on iTunes. So this wonderful listener left a review that says, awesome content and conversation this team brings together. Thanks for providing a fun and entertaining show. Thank you, Woozy Kalai. Thank you for listening and engaging. We really appreciate you.
And supporting us.
And thanks for tuning into Geeks Represent. If you enjoyed the discussion, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and everywhere podcasts can be found. If you want to add to the discussion, please visit geeksrepresent.com. Thanks for listening and share with your friends.